Hello, FileMaker people. My name's Dave Sullivan. Everybody calls me Sully, just like the lovable monster from Monsters, Inc. I'm here today to show you some of Mandelbrot LLC's new product, Mandelbrot PBX version 2. This was not publicly available until just at the beginning of November when it was put onto the FileMaker marketplace. It is a cloud-based PBX system, so you can replace your office phones, you can replace your cell phones, you can have your business network mixed with your personal network, or you can keep them separate. Basically allows you to do everything you could do at the hardware PBX through FileMaker and Twilio and a couple of AWS webhooks. Comes totally pre-configured, so all you have to do is put in your phone numbers and your routing information, and you can get moving on your own project for your own office very quickly. It's very inexpensive, and the best part is it's all in FileMaker. So if you're already into FileMaker, you're already using FileMaker for any of the different business processes that you have, any of your workflows, you're going to be able to use this product in order to integrate with that and allow you to not have to leave FileMaker to make your phone calls. You'll be able to attach voicemails to customer records. You'll make sure that you never miss any calls. There's just a lot of really cool features that I can show you here. So why don't we get started? So you can see here we're going to open the main PBX file. Now this is the back end. So the first thing that we're going to need to do with any PBX installation is we're going to have to create an endpoint. Now, an endpoint is a phone number that you own through Twilio. So Twilio is a service a lot of you guys are familiar with, but they basically, anything you can do with a telephone, you can do with Twilio. It's kind of like FileMaker in that it is just all the little building blocks and all the pieces that you can put together. And what this is basically a front end. This is what PBX is. It's a FileMaker front end for all of the Twilio functionality. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to import an endpoint from Twilio. Right. So what this says is too small. I'll read it for you. Warning, this button is meant for users who already own a voice-enabled Twilio phone number and want to provision it for use with Mandelbrot PBX. It will overwrite the voice destination for the Twilio phone number. Do not use this button if you aren't sure what that means. So basically, it's going to route the calls through Mandelbrot PBX instead of routing them however you had them set up in Twilio previously. So I'm just going to write down this number as I plug it in. It's 1-224-212-1611. 224-212-1611. I'm going to hit OK. And it'll ask me if I want to provision it, and I do. So it's going to import the phone number. It's going to do a couple of things for us. So see here we now have endpoint details. So each phone number has a JSON, right? And now it's set up with this voice URL. It's also, you can see it there, right? It's got a status callback. It's got all kinds of different things that you can do to it with these different settings. Now, this is all a little confusing, so we're just going to start with an easy one. Friendly name. This is going to be PBX demo line. Okay. So it changes the name in Twilio and here in PBX. So that's in both the dashboard here and the dashboard on Twilio. So you won't have to go back and say which number was which. It just automatically changes that for you. Now I'm also going to throw an image in there as an avatar. Just go into my images folder. Let's do the snowman. The snowman. Okay, cool. So now our endpoint has an avatar. It makes it a little easier for you to understand which one is which, because you're going to get a lot of different phone numbers that you line up for these. So I'm just going to close this part here. And the next thing we're going to need to do is create a user profile. Now, I'm already in here, right? But if I want to add somebody else, just click Add, put in a name, put in a fake person's name. They're going to use a SIP phone. And Mike Sheeran, why don't we represent him with the avatar? He's going to be one of our vendors. So we'll just throw that in there, right? So also we're going to need to add Mike. So we're going to need to add Mike's FileMaker name. Now, when you connect several different databases together, you want to be able to move between them smoothly and easily and have them communicate with each other. And the easiest way to do that is to share your username and password across several files. So what this does is by entering your username and your password here the first time, it actually creates a username and password for you in what's called the caller ID window. And that's going to be where you see all of your incoming calls. It's going to be where you conference calls, where you transfer calls to other users, where you look for your voicemail, where you click to jump to your CRM records, where you set your user settings. It's what most people will see as the front end for a product like this with PBX. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use Mike Sheeran's username and password here. Okay. So that'll plug him into all of them. Oh, I already put one in for him on one of the files. So he also, we're going to need to grab his credentials for his SIP address. Now this is something that if you're using business phones like desk phones, that you're going to want to be able to use. You're going to want to be able to put a physical phone on people's desks rather than just using their cell phones. Nobody wants to use their cell phone for everything. What you do is in Twilio's dashboard, you can set up these SIP credentials that allow you to join a SIP domain, and that registers your phone to a specific place. So see if I can look up his SIP credentials. So after a brief moment, I was able to locate Mike's SIP credentials and enter them here and test his phone. One nice feature is that you can test the phones. Just an example of that, if I test my cell phone with a call, it should ring, right? Looking up the little tiny thumbnail in the corner, right? So there we go. That rings. When I answer,
brought PBX to your SIP endpoint.
Right. So test. Then if I hit test, I can send myself a text message. Test it that way. Oh, yep, there we go. There's the message. So that's, that's great for PSTN, and that's publicly switched telephone network. It's a cell phone, it's a landline, it's your house phone, it's an existing office phone. Anything that's got a 10-digit phone number in the US is a PSTN line typically. If you have a SIP address like this, however, then you have a SIP phone. And when you test these, you can look over here. It should dial this phone over here. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so you can watch this happen. Right, so I hit click that, answer this phone.
Call from Mandelbrot PBX to your SIP endpoint. For more information, call us at 1-312-778-8787.
Cool. So that's how you know that your SIP phones are actually properly addressed, properly functioning. Send a test call through. It's also great to be able to do that with your cell phones. You get your cell phone messages, right? Your text messages, your phone calls there. That way you can test that those are working too. So once these things have been tested, one other thing you can do here, you can set the default caller ID for the user. That's for outbound. So I'm going to go ahead and set the default outbound caller ID for each of these users. So now what that means is when I make a phone call out from PBX, it's going to show that as the cell phone, or sorry, it will show that as the caller ID. So any calls that you send out, if somebody calls you back, they'll call you back through PBX. And that means you're not going to have to worry about your private cell phone number getting leaked out into the world. So what's next? What's next is that we have to decide where all the inbound calls are going. And that's called routing. So we're going to click Adjust Inbound Routes. And you'll see here we have this PBX demo line. So this is the endpoint that we set up. There's me on my cell phone. There's Mike, the vendor. And I'm actually going to real quick, I'm going to add an avatar for me just because it makes it easier for us all to understand who's who. We will throw in the block I for Illinois. Fighting Illini. There we go. So this is your inbound routing editor. Now, whenever you get a phone call that comes to this phone number, you're going to be able to handle which direction it goes, which way it routes, and whatnot. So I click that and it turns blue. If I want the phone calls to come to my my cell phone number, then I just click there, right? I'm going to open that back up for a second. So when I click it a second time, it's going to show I'm already connected there, right? So let's see what happens when I dial 1-2-2-4-2-1-2-1-6-1. Ringing. Should call my cell phone. Right. You'll notice it's calling me from the caller ID, right? From the endpoint's caller ID. Hello?
Hello?
That's pretty helpful. So, again, when you call through an endpoint, you're going to want to be able to see that endpoint's caller ID so that you can save the endpoint's caller ID number in your cell phone and say, hey, this is the sales number. I'm getting a sales call. Hey, this is the service number. This is the support number, right? You save those different endpoints. You can distinguish, well, which kind of call am I getting? And then decide, is this worth answering now, right? Screening calls is very difficult without something like that. So you're probably also wondering, what are all of these things here? So let's try doing one of these. So this little magnifying glass, you know, in order to get even better information about who's calling you and for what, I can click SMS caller ID data to users. What that's going to do is it's going to text me the information that it has. And sometimes you want to know what's the actual person who's calling you, what's their caller ID number, not just the endpoint's caller ID. So instead of just answering the phone blindly, I can actually get a text message first, and that'll allow me to decide, do I want to take this call now anyway, right? So I can look a little bit deeper. I also can turn on this thing called White Pages Lookup. So that looks it up in a public database, and that texts the information to my phone ahead of the call as well. Or if I want to, I can turn on FileMaker Lookup, and that'll look it up in FileMaker, in your FileMaker, not just any FileMaker. It'll look it up in your FileMaker CRM and text you whatever you want. So does somebody have an order pending? Does someone, somebody expecting a call? Is it a customer you haven't talked to in a year? Is it somebody that's not in your system? All of those things can be done. So for the sake of this demo, I don't have a FileMaker system that's attached to this because your solution is as varied as the uses are for this. I mean, there's each system has to be connected to this PBX thing by hand so that we know which fields go. And do you want their phone numbers? Do you want their addresses? Do you want a headshot of the person who's calling you? What information do you want to text? So let's just do a White Pages lookup here, and let's give this a call. So I can look, okay. It's kind of nice to be able to screen your calls, right? What do the rest of these things do? Now this is for Do Not Disturb Bypass. We're going to skip over that one for now, and we'll come back to it in a minute. So this is your voicemail settings. So each voicemail box needs 3 settings. It needs a number of times it's going to loop through your voicemail recording, through the greeting. it's going to need wait music, and it's going to need a voicemail greeting. So now what does that mean? There's a certain flow to the way that these things operate. So first, somebody calls and say you want to split the call to all these phones, right? You want to split it to 5 or 10 phones. All these phones are on different people's desks, right? So when you split those calls out, you need a way to have a voicemail system that, what if nobody answers, right? What happens when nobody answers the call? There's one voicemail box that has to cover all 5 of those phones at once. It can't just go to one person. It needs to go to all 5. So each endpoint, therefore, needs its own voicemail greeting. You've reached the sales department. You've reached the service department. You've reached the support department, right? So by splitting those up by endpoint, you can have voicemail boxes that you can split the voicemails across several people rather than just a single person. Now, while those phones are ringing, you also have the option to decide, what do they hear? Do they hear an announcement that is just another ad for the company that I'm working at? Do they hear nobody's available to take your call, it's after hours, and it just loops until they hang up? Do they hear the sound of the phone ringing? So all kind of depends on what you want for those things. And that's why you have these options, right? The last one being the number of times it'll loop through that recording. So before it goes to voicemail, I'm going to set this to 1, right? So we're only going to loop through once. Then I'm going to grab my personal favorite wait music here. Connecting call is what it's called. And this is going to upload the WAV file up to the cloud. So what Twilio does is it grabs it from your FileMaker server. You don't even get charged for the data being transferred. It just grabs that WAV file and plays it for the caller. And then I'm going to add a voicemail greeting. This is one I recorded for our Mandelbrot's Denver office. So I'm going to upload that one as well. So, okay. So I'm just going to punch in here too that I want a text message whenever I get a voicemail. I can also set up email, right? And this notifies all the users. So so we're going to get a text message and an email whenever you get a voicemail. Usually it's one or the other that people want. But, you know, if you're glutton for punishment like me, you might do both. So I'm going to throw Mike Sheeran in as well on this. Oh, and then we commit. I'm just going to pop that back open so you can see, Mike's on there. He's attached to this as well. If I want to take him out, I can take him out. If I want to take myself out, I can take myself out there. Anyhow, you have these settings. This is what we're going to test. So I'm actually going to turn off the caller ID because we're good on that for now. Right? We already showed that feature. Okay, and we're looking for this to call my phone and call the desk phone, right? And we should hear some music.
Connect your call.
Love this song. I'm gonna answer this from here. Okay. Right. Cool. So that song, that connecting the call, that was a robot voice recorded before the song "Say You Won't" by Brass Tracks. Fantastic music. It sounds even better when you have a subwoofer instead of what's in these little tiny phones. But that's what I chose for the wait music. Now, if it goes all the way through once, instead of just answering it, it's going to record a voicemail. So let's do that. Just gonna hit redial here. We can turn this down a little bit this time.
Please wait while we connect your
call
call.
my cell phone too. Now, the music is only available for calls that are split amongst many phones, right? So You can't set up music to play when it's just a one-on-one call. That's just you're gonna hear the sound of a phone ringing, right? But if you want to split it to many phones, you can play music like this. You can play the sound of a phone ringing or whatever. I also should point out this is a cell phone, and that's a desk phone, right? And there's the voicemail greeting for the voicemail that they share. So remember something. If I call a cell phone and I call a SIP phone, what's going to happen when my cell phone rings for 30 seconds and my SIP phone wants to ring for almost a minute? Well, the voicemail on my cell phone is going to answer, and it's going to direct the call to this guy. So in order to avoid that problem, the first method that you can take is, instead of having my calls go to my cell phone, I'm going to switch so they go to my SIP phone. It should be noted, if I take this out of here, it'll turn me red. Right? Why? Well, you don't want a call going somewhere where it can't. Right? But there we are. I'm going to put myself at extension 174. We'll test that phone. There it is, ringing. Right? Answer it.
This is a test call from Mandelbrot PBX to your SIP endpoint. For more information.
Cool. So we're good to go there. And I'm going to try calling the PBX demo line. 224-212-1611. Now that should split to these two phones. So you can see their lights blinking there.
Please wait while we connect
Right.
your call.
Might actually be easier to see their lights blink if they turn the light off there for a second. Actually, just leave that off. Ooh, my face washes out pretty bad if I do that. So, okay. So we're gonna let this go to voicemail. Once it's gone to voicemail, if we're lucky, we will get a voicemail that splits to these two phones. And I've also set it so that I get a text message that alerts me that a new voicemail has come in, and an email, and what else? And it should appear in the logs. So let's see how this works. Coming to the end of that song. Okay, here's the greeting.
You've reached the unified voicemail box for all phones attached to Mandelbrot Denver. Leave a message at the beep.
Here's a message at the beep for Mandelbrot Denver. Good day. Okay. So do we get a text message? There's the text message. Just going to hit that text message. It'll open the browser window on your phone, so you don't have to open your anything really. Hopefully my cell service.
For Mandelbrot Denver. Good day.
Right there it is there. If I open the voicemail recording here in my email, right? So here's my email. I click this. Here's a message at the beep for Mandelbrot Denver. Good day. Right, so it just opens in a browser window. For Mandelbrot Denver. Good day. And it also, if you hit logs and recordings, we go over to the last one. You can play it here. Here's a message at the beep for Mandelbrot Denver. Right, just browser window again. Just have to do this so you can see it's opening a new one every time. Or I can share it. I can send it via text message, via email. I can just copy the URL if I want to, right? So this is just the URL. The recordings for voicemail and all other recordings are going to save online for about 13 months, 12 or 13 months. If you want to save them for longer than that, you can download them and archive them separately. I can set that up for you. It's not part of the normal package or Mandelbrot PBX, but it's not a difficult expansion. So really not much of an add-on. It's pretty simple, just to download it into a local repository. That'll save you on storage costs because Twilio does charge you a certain amount per minute of storage per month. So if you're on the phone a lot, that might accrue over time. Or if you'd rather keep your recordings for more than a year, if you have regulatory needs or something else, then that can be very helpful as well. So let's move on. So what if we want to record the call? So let's record the call. We'll email the users. I'm also going to turn the SMS messages off here, or the voicemail notifications off. We're going to turn the recordings on. We're going to turn emailing users the recordings after. And we're going to turn on SMS to users. I'm also going to throw in a white pages lookup on that too. And right, so that's all for this guy. It's going to ring these phones.
Please wait while we connect your call.
Let's pick one up. Hello. 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 Okay. Let's make sure that that hangs up. It did. Okay. So, any second now, I should get a text message that sends me the recording. There's the text message. I don't know why it came in silently. It was a silent text message. I didn't turn my phone so it should go silently, but there it is. Came in silently. See, there's a recording, right? I play the recording. Here it is. Good stuff, right? Delete that out of my browser window. Cool. Also, if I look for that here, let's jump ahead to the next call. That's going to come in on the other side. And I bring in a browser window, just hit play recording, right? Cool stuff, right? Let's talk about logging. In Twilio, you have your own database of information where that information from your calls is all stored. It looks something like this. So each call has all of the calls, routing information, everything else listed in here, right? So if I expand all of these, it's got all of the information. So all this stuff. Now, this is the stuff that if you're a programmer, you're going to need this stuff in order to move your calls around. Now, instead of having to look at this, PBX has the information logged in a much more discernible fashion. So when you have a call, instead of looking at, like for example, this Twilio call log, it lists each leg of the call individually. So you have this one incoming call and then four outgoing calls, right? So this is the external leg and these are the internal legs, right? How can you possibly figure out which one is which unless somebody shows you how this is done? It's not very easy, right? I could look up here and say, okay, this is the parent call and there's a conference thing here and okay, and let me see the participants and oh, okay, here's one that participated for a while. Let's take a look at that call. And now we got 4 different pages open. So it's a lot easier when the information's all put together for you. So you have all of this that you need. So all of the information that you need in order to look at those child calls. Oh, and this is actually the wrong record. So I'm going to look at, okay, cool. Here's the settings for the call. Here's the JSON. I chose not to record this call, but those would show up here. There's the conference the conference JSON, all that stuff is there. There's the child calls, right? If I want to look at the Twilio page, I can do that by clicking the button, and I can get back to the same page if I want to. But for most people, they don't want to have to leave FileMaker if they don't want to. This is also really great if you already have a database built in FileMaker that has phone numbers or recordings that you want to attach to those phone numbers. You don't really know how to get that recording back. Let me show you that real quick. So for example, you have a call like, let's back up to one that we have a recording. Okay, this is a recorded call and it has child calls. So we'll get into what this means a little bit later, but it's using a system called Do Not Disturb Bypass. And that means when a call comes in, it redials 3 callers, right? This one, Mike, was answered by a human. This one, me, Sully, was answered by my answering machine. So it has the 2 recordings of those 2 answered call legs. Well, if I want to hear the machine one, I can listen to it this way.
I'm a voicemail. Please leave a message.
Right? Or I can listen to this one.
Hello.
Right? Now, the difference here, though, is that you don't have to figure out which one of these is the right one. It's just here. That's the main call recording. So you can set this up to integrate with your FileMaker system far more easily than trying to go through the 15 or 20 steps that it takes to get that information back to where you need it. It's all already programmed for you. If you have trouble finding what field is what, please just let me know and I'll help you out. Now, one other thing that happens from time to time, remember how I was saying if I have my phone not on a desk phone, but on a cell phone, right? Well, all the voicemails go into my cell phone at that point, right? If the person at their desk picks up the phone after my cell phone's voicemail has already picked up the call, then the call's just missed. Now, that can be a really big problem, especially if you have your offices distributed. There's many people in many locations. It's not just everybody in the same office where you can hear everything that's going on in the other offices. What if somebody's in the car or in another building or working from home or on an airplane? So one of the first customers I had for this, they had a program where there was a young woman who was helping with the telemarketing department. She had all the phone calls from several different ads going to her cell phone. And it was also going to 2 other cell phones, but her phone was on an airplane. And when you're in an airplane, you don't get any calls. Everything goes right to voicemail. So everybody else who was on that same phone number and was getting those phone calls from those ads, they weren't even getting the chance to answer the call. The calls were just going directly to the voicemail on her cell phone on the airplane. And she was flying to Las Vegas from Chicago. So 3 hours later, when she actually got onto the tarmac, she opens up her phone. She's got 4 or 5 missed calls and their voicemails. And when she calls them back, those customers are gone, right? That's the way that it is nowadays. If somebody doesn't get someone on the phone right away, a lot of times they just assume that number doesn't work and they call the next guy. Or maybe an hour or 2 later, you call them and they've already purchased something from a different customer. They've already found a competitor. So it's real important to not have that happen. One of the ways that we've found that it's possible to do that is with this function called Do Not Disturb Bypass. Now, what this does is it listens to the first few seconds of your call, and if it detects that it's not a human being, it just hangs up that leg of the call and lets the other call legs ring. So, for example, if I answer my cell phone and pretend to be my voicemail, this desk phone that Mike Sheeran is using, his phone's just going to keep ringing. So I'm going to go the other way around because it's easier to visualize by because I can put Mike Sheeran on what's it called, on speakerphone much more easily. So let's just try that now. So These two phones should light up.
Please wait while we connect
I'm
your
going to turn this guy down. I'm going to fake like I'm the voicemail. Hello, I'm the voicemail system. I'm going to ask you to leave a message at the beep and whatever and so forth.
Non-human detected. Disconnecting call.
If instead I answer and I just say hello. Hello?
Connecting to caller.
So the nice thing about that is you can have cell phones, you can have SIP phones, whatnot. You don't have to worry about it. Now, you'll also notice, oh, there's a message that came through. It's hard to see here. It says DND Bypass notification, Sully missed a call from PBX demo line. Right? What does that mean? It means if you're managing a department of people that are handling inbound calls, and it's on a critical, mission critical thing, that you can get text messages that say so and so did not answer their phone. And yeah, they might be on the phone, they might be doing something important, but if you know there's 3 people that are going to answer that line and none of them answer, you're up, right? It's your turn to answer that call. So you're going to have to go and find that person and call them back immediately. It's basically meant for managers to be able to keep a little bit closer eye on their employees, right? Now, the other thing that's kind of brutal about this is if somebody's phone truly is on Do Not Disturb or is set, it's actually off, then you can't really call them and yell at them because their phone's off. But the next time you see them, you can let them know that they need to be on the phone and you'll have a record, right? Let's take a look at what that looks like in the log. Let's jump over here. Now here's a recording of that call. Right, if I hit play.
Connecting to caller.
Right. It records not the parent leg of the call. It doesn't record the phone that's calling in when it's a multi-destination call. It records the phone that picks up, or at least it looks like it does, right? What about these child calls? Well, what's a child call? Well, the first call is the person calling the endpoint, right? That's your external phone number, this phone number calling this endpoint. Then it gets split. Got split to these 2 places. What was the result? So when they called me, the machine started. When they got Mike Sheeran, it got a human being. Now, if I want to listen to the human one, that's the same one, right? It's the same one as this one. Hello?
Connecting to caller.
But if I want to find out, well, what happened to the person that didn't answer their phone?
Hello, I'm the voicemail system. I'm going to ask you to leave a message at the beep and whatever and so forth.
Non-human detected. Disconnecting call.
Right. It records them independently. So if you have somebody that says, well, I answered the phone and it didn't really work and the system's broken, we're going to go back and we're going to listen and see whether or not it was you or your voicemail that answered the phone. And it records both, right? Now, bear in mind, one thing that you have to do in order to get that to work is you have to record both calls. And to do that, your recordings have to be enabled, right? If you turn this off, you turn off this checkbox. If this is gray, not black, you're not going to get these recordings over here because it's not recording the calls. Now, recording may be a crime in your jurisdiction. So consult your attorney before you turn this button on, before you click record all calls. But there it is. I mean, that's the way if you really want to keep track of the people on your team, and more importantly, give them the freedom to walk out in the middle of the world and not have to be chained to their desk all the time. I mean, that's a tremendous perk to be able to work from home. It doesn't mean that there shouldn't be any supervision, but if you want to work from home, You can record the calls. You can turn on Do Not Disturb Bypass to make sure that you don't lose any calls that way, right? So I'm also going to show you a couple more endpoint details. Do Not Disturb, when you turn it on, it sends messages to people, right? It sends a text message to the other users that lets them know somebody didn't answer their phone, right? So this is where you set that up. You can click send missed call SMS to users. You can hit send missed call email to users, and it'll send an email notification. You can add additional ones. So if you're a manager, but you don't want to get the phone calls, you put your number in here, and that way you don't have to be a routed user. If you just click this box, then it's going to send to everybody that's routed to that endpoint. So let's think about that for a second. You got this PBX demo line, and if you look at, here's the people that are routed to the PBX demo line. The other way to look at it is to do this, PBX demo line. Right. There we go. So that's just these two. These two people will get a text message when you click this box for Do Not Disturb, right? They'll get a text message that says, this person didn't answer their phone, right? If you click this email, then Sully will get one because he's got an email address. Mike Sheeran won't get one because they don't have an email address. If Mike doesn't have an email address, then Mike doesn't have an email address. We can't send him an email. Oh well, right? So the next piece of this, if you wanted to say you have an administrator, right? I want to get the emails anyway. Admin at Illinois, like at right. I can put my admin email in there, and I can even unclick this, or I can just say I'm the only one who needs to know if somebody misses a text message or misses a phone call. I can put my phone number in here, right? You put my cell phone number in there and uncheck this, and then it should only tell me if somebody missed a call. I don't really recommend that because if people don't think they're being watched, then a lot of times they don't do the right things. So you also notice down here there's these advanced settings. If you have a standard way of greeting people on the phone, like for me, I just say Mandelbrot, this is Sully. But if you have a longer greeting, like, good morning, this is Dave Sullivan. Thank you for calling Mandelbrot LLC. How can I direct your call today? That might be long enough that you confuse the system and it might think, well, that's probably a voicemail. Because all it's doing is listening for how long of a greeting do you have. If it's below a certain point, that's a human. If it goes beyond a certain point, that's a voicemail. So that's how it detects the answering machines. So you have to be able to adjust those settings, and the defaults are set up. These are just Twilio's defaults, but if you want to set it differently, there's this whole article that you can read about it on at Twilio, right? About what each setting is and what it does. I'll let you read into that if you want to. I can help you set those as well. So let's turn that back off. Also voicemail. Very similarly, you can do the notifications for the voicemails here. And recordings, if you want to record all the calls, email, SMS, it has very similar options there. The one thing with recording, its standard is to record from ringing and to do dual channels. So what that means is the caller is on one side and the callee is on the other. And those two channels go over your left and your right ear when you're listening in stereo. If you're doing just a normal record, it mixes the sound together and you can't tell who's talking as easily. But when you separate them, you can hear one side's the caller, one side's the callee. Right? If you're trying to run AI transcription, you're trying to run everything through some sort of speech to text, you can run the left side through and the right side through, and then use timestamps to figure out who's talking and when they're talking, right? Rather than having it all mixed together and you're not really sure, is it the caller or the callee? And for a lot of organizations, that's really important. I mean, it can make a difference on a sales call, especially to know whether or not it was the customer who said they were interested versus the person that said they should be interested who was trying to sell them something. So acknowledged interest, I guess, is what they call that in the sales world. So a couple other things here we'll go over. Every call is listed here in the endpoints queue. Right, these are all queued calls. Now, Twilio has a functionality where you can stack up calls in a call queue. Every time we connect an endpoint, it creates a queue, and every time you call that endpoint, it puts a call into the queue. So the first person who picks up the first call. The second person who picks up the second call. The third person who picks up the third call, right? And that allows you to make a lot of calls to the same phone number, or have the phone ringing with two different people at the same time, right? So that's one thing. There's some more advanced stuff you can do with this, but for the base version, all that we do is we register the fact that you'll have a call queue, and it'll help you keep from having two calls get bounced, right? Two calls don't work at the same time, and having one of them get bounced. If you need to be able to pick people out from the middle of the queue, or see how long somebody's been in the queue, or have a different hold music for the people that are in the queue, announce there are 7 people ahead of you in line and you have 9 more minutes to wait. All those things can be done, but for most of our customers, they're not going to experience a high enough volume of calls that they need to be done. So they are optional. They're things you can purchase a la carte as add-ons from Mandelbrot. If I want to make a phone call out, that person has to be able to call me back. And if I change the phone number that I'm calling out from, then they can call me back at the right number, right? That's outbound caller ID. Now, inbound caller ID is about, what do I see on my phone when I get a phone call, right? So am I going to see the person who's calling me? Am I going to see their phone number? Or am I going to see a phone number that's associated with my software, right? So what I mean by that, the standard way of doing this is for you to call from call from the endpoint's phone number. If I just have this endpoint set with neither of these boxes, what happens? Set the caller ID. Your users see when calls are received by this endpoint. The default behavior is the endpoint's phone number is displayed. So remember, this phone number is 224-212-1611, right? So if I dial 1-224-212-1611, it's going to ring, and when it does, it should show that. Let's get this text message out of here. It should show that as the cell phone, or as the caller ID, right? 224-212-1611. Great. I can save that in my phone. I know that's my demo line is calling me, or maybe it's sales or service or whatever, but I don't know really who's calling me. Now, I can also set this if it's a direct line. So I can set the caller ID to call me from the user that's calling me, right? Passes calls through to users without changing the caller ID of the inbound caller, for direct lines only. So if I click this, then it's going to call through with the number that I'm calling from. So let's do this again. I'm calling 1212. Oh, no, I'm not. 1-224-21. Sticky phone. Okay. So this should come up as 281-393-0836, right? Because this is my Houston number, right? So that only works for direct calls. If I add Mike Sheehan to this this line. Watch what happens. It's the number that I'm going to get. I'm not getting anything. What's going on?
Please wait while we connect your call.
It's only calling through to my SIP phones. Hello? Right? So why is that? Why does that happen? Well, the reason why is because when you have a call that goes from a PSTN number, and then it goes through PBX, and then it tries to use the caller ID in PBX and then split that call, it can't control the caller ID for all those numbers. It can only control the caller ID from numbers that it owns, right? If PBX doesn't own the number over here, PBX only owns endpoint numbers, or it only owns the numbers that it owns. It doesn't own this number, so it can't split that into many different places. It can only send it along to one, right? So it sends it along to that SIP phone. I don't even think the SIP phone really shows the right caller ID on that. So again, that's only for direct lines. So if you want somebody to say, hey, I got a private line, here's my number, and that way, you're giving somebody a phone number that's, hey, yeah, this goes only to my cell phone, and I can tell who's calling, but they don't really have my cell phone number, right? So it's a little sneaky, but most people would just give people their cell phone numbers, but sometimes people don't want that. You want to be at home, you want to be at home. You want to be off, you be off. So that's this first one. Direct lines only. It's not meant for use without being on a direct line. I really do mean it. Call users from system. From time to time, there's going to be users that want to not have to continually save more and more phone numbers in their cell phone contacts. A good example of that is this remodeling company that I used to work at. They started advertising in magazines. Like here's one magazine, the Home Mag and Clipper, and they had these other things. There's coupon books, right? These things get sent to people in the mail, and everybody who sells this stuff thinks that they're Don Draper, right? They come into your business, they say, boy, do I have the thing for you. I got an app, I got a way to track your phone calls, I got a way to get you advertisements all over the place. We'll do billboards, we'll do radio, we'll put you in all these ads, you'll be able to track everything, it'll be great. We'll just get one phone number and put it everywhere. And then they try to tell you, oh, well, your ads are working here and working there. And that's not the way that we wanted to do business. We wanted to be able to track for ourselves. So the problem with tracking for yourself is that you need a way to reliably tell, did he find the phone number in the magazine? Did he find it on the billboard? Did he find it on the radio? How are you going to know? So instead, we use a different phone number in every location. And that's great if you have 100 phone numbers and they all trickle down to a couple of phones. The problem, though, is how do you keep up when that phone is your cell phone? Nobody answers calls that they don't understand who's calling, that they haven't saved the number already. So it's impossible, though, if you're doing 3 or 4 new phone numbers every week to keep saving new numbers and keep saving new numbers. It gets tedious, especially when you have teenagers answering the phones. So what they did instead is they asked me to knock out, and I added this feature, call users from system. Pass the calls through to users with system caller ID, allowing users to store only one phone number in their cell phone contacts. It's meant for organizations that change their endpoints often, right? So what does that mean? It means I save one phone number and it works for all of my endpoints, right? I just click that checkbox on the endpoint itself. Every call that goes to this 224 phone number is actually going to come through from the system caller ID, which is a different 224 number, the 2796549, not the 2121611, right? And that means I can set up 5 or 6 or 10 or 100 different endpoints and only save one number in my contacts. Now this, coincidentally, that system phone number, that's also the phone number you get all your text messages from that say this is who's calling you, all of your caller IDs, and it's the one that you get all your voicemails and all of your call recordings if you're having them texted to your phone. So use that one number. We have, this is the phone number we're going to dial, and this is the phone number, the system caller ID is the phone number that's going to show up on my cell phone. So let's just go ahead and do that. 1-2-2-4-2-1-2-1-6-1-1. Watch as it rings. Right, 279-6549. So that's the system number. And I, of course, can tell my whole team, save this one phone number in your cell phone. PBX allows administrators to set caller IDs for their users. So if you look at my screen, so outbound caller IDs is what we're talking about here. My current outbound caller ID is 224-212-1666. So if I wanted to switch that, I would do that here. Now that's just for me, right? That's for me as the administrator. I can switch my settings there. If I want to set them for a user, I click user profiles and I scroll down to the user and I change them here, right? Or I change them, like this is Paulita's. I wanted her to call from the recording test line. Now, just as a reminder, the reason that's important is because whatever phone number shows on the called party's phone as whatever you come up as, that's the number they're going to call back as. So, or that's the number that's going to get the return phone call. Okay, so what you want to do with these is typically set them as the place where they're going to get the phone call, right? So if you want to make calls out from the recording test line and have the calls come back to Paulita at the recording test line, it's just as easy as clicking there. You click OK, and the next time you look in there, it's right there, right? So she's the recording test line. Cool. So I'm currently set as the hunt group, right? So I'm going to go ahead and set that so that it's nothing, right? So I cleared it. So you can see I'm cleared. That means I got nothing there. So this will set it to call as the system caller ID, right? So it'll just call as the default number that you're getting all of your text messages from, that, you know, all of your notifications. I don't recommend that. It's much better just to set, let's put this one as the 1611 number. Okay. So now we have a nice caller ID. So just to demonstrate that, let me dial my cell phone. My cell phone, yeah, 16 from the dial pad. Now the first thing it'll do, since I'm set as my location is my desk, it's going to call my desk. I answer there, and then you can see there's my caller ID on the cell phone. So I'm gonna answer, hello, hello. Cool. So if I jump back over to my screen over here and I set my caller ID, let's change it to the 666 number, and then we will dial the phone again. Okay. So you can see now that's calling as the 666 number. Hopefully it'll focus. Focus. Focus on, yep, there we go. Okay. I'll just answer that. Right. Hello, 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 hello. Cool. You're looking to do that in your CRM, so you can actually add buttons to your CRM pretty easily that will do the same thing. So right now I'm set to call from, I can set up, okay, cool. I want to call from my caller ID with the system number, the user's number, or a custom number. Now, one thing I want to remind you of, you cannot call from a phone number you do not own. So you either have to buy it through Twilio or verify that you own it. So if you wanted to, you could set up that custom caller ID after you verify it with Twilio. You can set that custom, customize and throw your own phone number in here. So if you wanted to say, I'm going to call this customer from my cell phone, but I want it to ring through my desk instead because my cell phone's charging or I left it in the car or whatever, you can do that. So, oh, right. So it takes a little extra setup to do that, but totally plausible, can be done. So let's also, you can do this from the caller ID window. There is a dial pad here as well. I'll click live calls, dial new. I can just punch a phone number in here. It's going to dial from the caller ID that's listed at the bottom of the ticket there. And when I answer my phone here, it's going to call right there. Right there it is. Answer the call and end it. Cool. Now, if you really wanted to, I could set up something for you that would make it so you can, I can customize something where in the settings of the caller ID window, you could select your number here as well. Currently, that's not a standard feature. It is an add-on because almost nobody in the world really needs that. But there it is. Okay, so what's next? So we have these 3 users, and other thing we can do is we can set up a conference between them. So I'll hit start conference, answer the phones. There's 1, 2, 3, right? So all phones are connected. And then we'll go back to sharing the screen. Look at the ones in progress. Here we have a conference, 3 participants in progress. If I switch myself over to my PSTN line, I can join muted, or I can just join. So if I just hit join, it's going to call my phone, answer, right? Maybe. I could also join muted. I can mute the callers. I can mute the participants, right? So now you don't hear any echo. Unmute. Should be able to hear echo. I'll turn this up so you can hear the echo. Can you hear the echo? You don't want that much echo, right? Okay, so if I open this, this is what most of your users are going to see. This is it. It's the whole thing. It has a few tabs that we'll get into in a moment here. But before we do, you'll notice it says my location is my SIP phone. 174 is my extension number. My caller ID, right, is there as well. And then we'll go over to settings and we'll switch over to PSTN. Now, you'll notice my location changes to my cell phone number, right? That's pretty good, right? That way, when I get calls, it's going to call my cell phone, not call my desk phone. If I hit my SIP, it's going to go, okay, incoming calls are going to my desk phone, not my cell phone. So you can choose one or the other. Now, you can also, if you're looking to control this from your phone, you want to do this from your cell phone, you can use FileMaker Go or WebDirect to log into the caller ID window and change these settings. So somebody that's on vacation is away from their desk can they can flip their location to their desk or to their cell phone without having to mess with it, without having to be at the office, which is really nice. Now, one other thing with this is you'll notice a couple of different things here. Away no calls and block SMS notifications. So if I check those boxes, so let's just check the away no calls box first. So what happens if I dial one of those phone numbers? So I'm going to dial one of the, right? What's going to happen if I dial one of those numbers that's supposed to go to me? You'll notice this phone's lighting up, but my phone, my cell phone, they're not getting called, right? So the calls don't go through. They just go to whoever else is on that route. I can also block SMS notifications. That means I'm not going to get any text messages for any reason. So if you want to turn off your phone without turning off your phone, you can click both of these check boxes and go out to the movies and you don't get any business calls. If you want to do something else, or if it's not your turn to answer the phone, you can click these and everything goes silent. It's really nice. Okay, so I can also click these little tin cans and find out that I'm receiving calls from these different routes. Now if I change that, I can also adjust. Let's say I want to take myself off of this one. It should update that over here, right? Or I put myself back in. At portals, you have to refresh them manually, which is kind of a pain in the neck, but oh well. Okay, so let's do some really interesting stuff now. So we have this caller ID thing, right? So if I call, I have these two different lines, right? Remember, we can filter in any way that we want. I'm going to filter to just the ones that are coming to me. So I have this PBX demo line and the second line, either the snowman or the square peg in the round hole, right? So if I dial the number for the snowman, it's going to show up in my caller ID with the snowman. Here's the phone number that the snowman calls, right? That's getting called. And here's the number that's calling it. So let's call that number from a different one. 1-224-212-1611. Hit dial. And it's gonna show up. Okay, cool. We got a call coming in from this phone number.
While we connect your call.
It's coming in from this phone number on the right. You notice how it changed all of them, right? It actually shows you a history of the times that that person's called and that they're calling this endpoint, the snowman endpoint, right? Every time they've called the snowman endpoint. What happens if I decide I want to call the other endpoint, right? He hangs up. He's not listening. So if I call the other endpoint, 1-224-212-1666. Okay, it's dialing. Right, it's dialing there. Incoming call, same phone number, and it's calling the other endpoint. I'm going to answer the call. Hello? Okay, cool. So you see how that changed to answered? And then if I hang up, it should change to completed. So this is really nice if you're trying to keep track of who's calling you, where they're calling you, what they're calling for. And it helps you screen phone calls, especially if you have a receptionist or you have 10 different business lines and you're trying to remember which one is which. That avatar, it can be an image of an advertisement. It can be an image of a person. It could be a departmental logo. It could be anything. So when you have that snowman, that could tell you, well, that's a customer that's calling because they're calling on the customer service line, or the square peg in the round hole might be somebody calling on the sales line, right? So it should help you there. Also, you have the ability to mark these calls as red, right? So just kind of graze them out. And you can mark satisfaction, right? So if somebody had a good call, might be a happy call. All the other users, like all the other people that are using the same system are going to see that smiley face, and they're going to know that was a happy call, right? You can see your history, right? These are all the calls that were made, not just the calls that were from this phone number. Here's all the calls that were routed to me, including the outbound calls that I routed out. Here's only the ones that connected, right? Only the ones where somebody answered. And then I can also look at the ones that have voicemail. Now, of course, if I click, it's going to open up the voicemail in the browser window. Right? If the voicemail's been listened to, it's going to be green. If it hasn't been listened to, it's going to be red. Now, you remember how we were talking about how voicemail boxes can spread over many people? Well, green means you've listened to it, and red means you haven't heard it yet, and neither has anybody else. The thing that makes this unique, though, is if somebody else has listened to the voicemail, just not you, it's going to turn yellow. So at least you'll know somebody's heard it. You just won't necessarily know who. You can go back into the voicemail logs and actually look at that as an administrator. But for most people that are dealing with a high volume of calls, you get voicemails, you just have to get through them and make sure you're not trying to hit the same one somebody else is already on. So you hear that voicemail, you call it back, on you go, right? And everybody else can see it's yellow already. So one more piece. There's always time for one more thing, right? So if you're like me, you're thinking, okay, this is all really cool, but what happens when I need to transfer a call to somebody else that I work with? How do you do that, right? So let's try that. We're going to start up a call. So we got this incoming call. I'm going to answer the call. Okay, so the call's been answered. We have an answered call. I'm on the phone. I click over to my live calls. If I don't see it here, I can always click refresh, but it's going to come up. This is the same call, right? The same call is over here, 9:28 p.m. with all these, right? Both of them ending in 666. I swear I do not worship the devil. And from here, I can click add. Now, this dialog is meant for a couple of things. One of them is the transfer calls. So say I want to transfer this call to, who did we call? Let's transfer it to Mike Sheehan. First, I select Mike Sheehan as my user destination, and then I have the choice to blind transfer this call. Now, if I blind transfer it to Mike, it will make it so I can hang up the call from me, right? So imagine just for a second. So this is the person who originated the call right here. This is my desk at reception, and I want Mike to take the call instead, right? So what do? I blind transfer the call, right? The call from here to here. I blind transfer it to here, and then I can hang up this phone, right? So let's do that. So just click blind transfer. Hear that beep. And then I can actually hang up this phone. You hear that other beep, right? So if Mike doesn't answer, it should just beep and go to voicemail after about 30 or 40 seconds. You also can, in your settings, you can set a personal voicemail right for your desk. This one's just going to beep and go to, see it just beeps and it's going to voicemail, and now we have a voicemail from Mike. Cool. So let's go back a second and we'll talk about that for a second. So what did we do? We took an incoming call and we transferred it to someone else, right? Big deal. Everybody's phone can do that, right? Maybe not. Maybe your phone can't. I know my cell phone, my personal cell phone can't do that. But most office phone systems can do that. How about we try doing something a little bit more complicated? Let's make that same phone call again. So I'll answer the call, right? So I've answered the call. I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to go to my active calls. here's that new call, right? Just make sure it's the right call, refresh. And now this time, when I pick Mike, I'm going to add him as a conference participant. So it's going to be a little different. Mike's going to hear an announcement. So you hear that beep. So Mike's phone rings. You answer. And then announcement.
Sully has invited you to join an inbound call in progress. Press any key to join or hang up to decline.
I'm gonna press a key, and now he's joined in the conference. Oh. Okay, cool. So if I share my screen to show you what that looks like here, I went from active to conference. I can now, if I want to, I can disconnect people, or I can mute them, right? I can mute them all. You see, like, there's no feedback, right? If I unmute them, you can hear there's plenty of echo. I can also disconnect people. I'm not going to disconnect myself because then I'll disappear. Like I won't be able to see any of these things. You can only see, in other words, the conference participants that are in a conference with you, right? If I take myself out of this conference, it'll disappear all these things. Now on Mike's desk, on Mike's phone, he'll still be able to see the original conference participant and me, and he can knock me out of the call too if he wants to, right? So so I'm going to disconnect him. I'm going to disconnect Mike. Right? You hear him, he's gone, right? So he's gone. And if I want to, I can actually disconnect everyone. Now, one important thing about the way that conferences are set up this way is that the external call, like whatever call is out into wherever else, that's the call that everything else is built on top of. So if you take that bottom Jenga block out, all the other calls fall apart, right? But for the purpose of turning a live call into a conference, this one call, that's the one call to rule them all, right? I'm going to disconnect this, and you'll notice both of those lines are disconnected, right? You can also add a participant to an existing call as a muted observer. This allows someone to join the call without hearing a beep to announce them or when they leave, and it also means they're just going to be able to listen in. So let's see what that looks like. We go ahead and place a call. That's going to dial these phones. I'm going to answer this one. Then if I jump back over to my screen share, I have this answered call in the active tab of the live calls. You can always hit refresh to make sure it's the freshest information. Click add. I'm going to pick Paulita as the person I'm adding, but I'm going to add her as a muted observer. Now this is going to dial her phone, so you might be able to hear that dialing already, right? But you notice you didn't hear a beep when that phone was dialed. Now, when I answer, it's going to show up this way.
Sully has invited you to listen in on an inbound call in progress as a muted observer. Press any key to join or hang up to decline.
So I join that call. Now, I can make as much noise. I can make as much noise as I want. I can make as much noise as I want. I can talk into this phone, and it's not going to do anything here. Loud feedback, right? It's also indicated, jump back over here, you click refresh, you'll notice Paulita's on the call, but she is muted. So if you have calls that you need to listen in on as a manager, then you can do that. Now, for privacy's sake, this is only available on calls that are routed to multiple people. So if you're not routed as a destination to the call, or you're not already on the call, you can't invite someone to join as an observer. In other words, you can't invite yourself to join as an observer unless, of course, you're an administrator and you do it through the PBX, the actual data file which is the back end. So that's something that if you need to do it, please just give me a call. I'll show you how to do it, but I don't want to put it online. So cool. The third way you can add a user to an existing live call is as a coach. Now, when you do this, you add that person. They can hear the entire conference, so any number of other people, but only the person who requested the coaching is going to be able to hear them. Let's see it in action. So here we have my screen. I'm going to dial in a call. And dial that. Answer that. Okay, so now that we have an answered call, I'm going to add myself to this call as a coach. So as soon as I click this, it's going to complete. So clicking it now, it's going to dial my phone. So you can see it ringing there. You see that green light blinking. So answer that.
Invited you to Coach Sully in an inbound call in progress. Sully will be able to hear you, but the rest of the callers will not.
So I'm just going to answer the call. Okay, so that call's been answered. Now, my microphone's right here, but if I take this phone, so I'm only really talking into this phone, you can hear that if I put this receiver up to my microphone, you should be able to hear here. Right. You should be able to hear what's whispering in the phone. Right. It's whispering in the phone. So, do the same thing with this phone. You can't really hear anything at all. It doesn't translate. So, these calls here. So, it's going to be a really great feature if you have customer service people that are trying to help people on the phone. It can be used along with hunt groups as well. So, if you have a team of people that are available for coaching, then you can do that. So, let's do this one last one. So we have an active call, and from time to time, sometimes people want to dial in somebody that's not a user, right? You're on a call and you say, hey, we need to have a conference call with that person, and well, we're both on the phone now. How hard is it going to be to schedule with that other person? Well, why don't we just call them and see what's there? Let's see if they're there. Okay, hang on a second. You dial, and then you should be able to get a call through this way. Okay. If I answer.
Sully has invited you to join an inbound call in progress. Press any key to join or hang up to decline.
I'll jump back over here to my screen. Cool. Now those are both outbound legs. So if I hang up that one, it actually hangs up everyone, right? So again, you hang up an external leg, not an outbound leg. I misspoke. You hang up an external leg, it hangs up the whole conference, right? That's just the way that it's built. There's one more thing I'm going to show you before I sign off for the evening, and this is the concept of doing a hunt group. So a lot of people have asked me for this thing where it's like you have a receptionist, they get a call, and then they need to transfer that call, but they need to transfer it not to one person, but to like 10 people at the same time. They don't care who answers the phone. They just want somebody to take the call. How do you do it? Here's how you do it. You do that over here. I'm going to adjust an endpoint. Instead of making this a second inbound line, we're going to rename it hunt group. Right? So now you got a hunt group. What is a hunt group? Well, we're going to adjust this. Oh, hunt group comes first. Hunt group, let's put Mike and Paulina. Actually, yeah, we'll put these two people in the hunt group. and then the demo line will just be me. I'll play the part of the receptionist for the purposes of this this one. Okay, so now I'm also going to add another user, and I'm going to call that user Hunt Group, and I'm going to put in a phone number for the Hunt Group. And what phone number do you think I'm going to use? This guy. So now, what is that going to do? So what are we talking about here? Well, if you call the PBX demo line, and then I transfer you to the user named Hunt Group, it's going to call this phone number, which is going to then call these guys, right? So let me show you what that looks like in real life. It's going to ring my phone. So there we have a connected call. Let's take a look at here. So we have the direct call. We're going to hit add. We're going to go to the Hunt Group. Then we're going to blind transfer. Hear a beep. Then you see.
Please wait while we connect.
I'm actually going to hang up my phone. These two phones are ringing. I'm going to answer this one. Hello? Hello? So you can see, made a couple of posters for reference. Anybody that is looking to put together something like this, right? You know that they're serious about what they're doing. But this poster, you get your free, let's actually try to focus on the reflection. There we go. If you order the Mandelbrot PBX, I will send you a poster. This is just the live calls tab, the workflow for it, right? Something fun and nerdy to hang on your wall. And I hope you enjoy all of the wonderful things that I showed you. This whole software thing, all of Mandelbrot PBX, starts at $7.50 a month plus Twilio usage, which is less expensive than any other, than anything else as far as the basic software to run a PBX. It's built in FileMaker, which should help you tremendously with integration. And it's just awesome. I really did enjoy writing it. So we'll see you on the other side. Hopefully we'll be talking about how to install this for you. Cool, thanks, bye.